Okay, so for our segment today, I've been asked many times, especially when it's somebody's first time buying a home, even as an investor, how the offer process works. And so I wanted to kind of give an overall view of what goes into writing an offer, what you can do to make your offer more competitive, what you or your realtor need to do as part of it. So the first thing is, and I don't know, I only am a realtor in Texas. I don't know how other states do it. Um, but I have had some confusion from out of state clients that think that an offer is maybe like a letter or letting them know this is what we want to offer. And then when they're signing means they've accepted that offer. So I've had people get confused before, like, well, are you sending it in DocuSign? Does that mean it's accepted? No. When you're signing this contract, this is essentially your offer letter. You're sending in, this is what we'd like to pay. So this is how you make your official offer. You can always contact the seller or listing agent before you send in that offer. And you definitely should do that, or your realtor definitely should if it's on the market, because you want to talk with them and find out what's important to them. You want to let them know, like, I want to work with you. I want to make your life easier. What do you need? Is it you need a fast closing date? Is it you need just the highest price and the closing date doesn't matter? I've even called before and found out that they needed a lease back and then put that in our offer at the beginning so that it was way more competitive than other offers. So you can get so much information if you just go ahead and call the listing agent, or the seller if you're doing direct marketing. It's a really good way to make that good first impression and convince them that you are a buyer that they want to work with. Like it's just a really good way to start off the transaction. I sort of hate it when I list a property and I just get an email with an offer and like nothing, just just this offer. It just kind of feels like they didn't really put that much effort into it. So you want to make sure that they know, like, you're on top of it, you're going to be good to work with, and you want to meet their needs. Oh, the other thing is, in a hot market like this, it's likely that they have other offers already. And so in the time it takes you to write an offer, which you're going to see today, how much time that actually takes, you don't want them to accept another offer. So I always at least text the listing agent, like, hey, I'm going to work on an offer. And so this is all of the information that you need to write that contract. So we use the TREC 1-4 family contract. That's a promulgated form that is used by every realtor. We have to use it. It's used I see most wholesalers using it too. It's just a good offer contract. But these are all the things in it that you can change. So these are basically the negotiables of the contract. And you saw the lines there. This is how it looks on my system. And then I type into these fields. So each one of the things we're going to talk about is a field, and you need to fill it in with something. So that's what we're getting together before we even start on the offer. So obviously you have the sales price, but then there's a whole lot of small things that can be changed just ever so slightly that can make a huge difference. So this is the list of things that you need to have ready for your realtor, or if you're wholesaling, that you need to understand and put into your contract right off the bat. So we're going to go through them one by one, and I'm going to explain what they are and then explain how you can, if you're in a competitive situation where you've got several offers, how you can kind of bump yours up and get chosen, because that's the situation here in San Antonio right now most of the time. So you have your sales price. You're going to tell your realtor, like, this is the sales price. Hopefully you pull comps and run some numbers to arrive at that price. But you don't just need to say a price. You need to say whether you're paying cash or whether you're getting a loan, what kind of loan, and then what down payment percentage you're going to put, because I need to write on these lines the cash you're paying at closing, and then the amount that is being financed, I need all of that information right here at the beginning. Then the next thing we need to talk about is earnest money. Earnest money is just basically, hey, I'm a serious buyer. Here's some money so that if I walk away at the end, you keep it. So that blank is usually 1%. That's, if we're talking about a typical normal transaction, it's 1%. So if you're buying a $200,000 home, the earnest money is $2,000. That is one of the things as an investor, like with normal homeowners, I wouldn't really bump that up because that's not something that they're really going to be looking for. But in an investment home situation, especially when you see one of these that like gets thrown on the market for really low and there's like 40 investors that day, you go look at it and they've got 1 billion offers the first day. The earnest money really can make a difference. And so I've had one client win in one of those situations by doing an earnest money of $10,000 and no option period. So definitely risky. He was very experienced, so he was able to do that. But that's what earnest money means, and that's what typically I'm going to put 1% unless you tell me otherwise. The title company, this is where you select the title company as well. Technically, the title company is negotiable. In San Antonio, typically the seller chooses it. So it's usually in the listing, like, hey, I want to use this title company. You can ask for a different one. Typically, if you ask for a different one, they'll say, well, okay, but you have to pay for the title insurance. So most people don't want to do that, but it's definitely negotiable, like everything in real estate is. Then down here where it says title policy, number 6, section A, this is the title policy, the insurance policy that you're going to need on your home. Typically, sellers cover that. Again, for investors, that's totally different because everything's on the table. But if you're just talking about a regular transaction, most of the time that's going to be paid for by the seller. That's why they choose the title company. If you decide to change this, like if you want to offer to pay for the title policy yourself to kind of give yourself an edge, make sure that you call attention to that because listing agents are going through so many offers, and a lot of times they're going to assume that its seller is paying that, and they're going to get your misread your offer basically. So you want to call attention to, if you're going to pay for the title policy, you want to make sure that they understand that. Next is the survey. So the survey is one of those things, somebody has to pay for it. A lot of times the sellers will still have one, and that's nice because then we can usually use that one. Nobody has to pay for it. If there's not a survey, there's not really a typical here. I see it pretty 50-50 that buyers and sellers, split that cost. Sometimes it's the buyer, sometimes it's the seller. It's not a huge cost, $350 to $500, normally more like $400. So it's not something it's not normally something that's like a deal killer, but just something to be aware of and put into your numbers. At the top of this slide here too, this is the bottom of the title insurance notes in the contract, and it takes too long to explain, but basically this will be amended to read shortages in area at the expense of buyer or seller. If you are using an existing survey, that's when you should check this box. And I usually check that the seller pays for it because, to be honest, I think a lot of realtors don't even look at that because that's not one of the major, most of the time it's like sales price, closing costs, option period, closing date. It's kind of the big ones that we look at in a rush. I've only ever had one listing agent ask me to change it to the buyer. It costs about $100, $100 to $200 to change that or to make that amendment. So it's not the end of the world, but it's definitely a good thing to have if you are using an existing survey. And maybe I'll cover that a different day. Okay, the next thing is a residential service contract. So if you haven't bought a home before, this is basically, it's called a home warranty is what we usually call it. It's a company, they kind of, like, honestly, they all suck. They make it really difficult to make a claim, but they cover your air conditioner, water heater, the major systems of your home in case something breaks for 1 year at a time. And so, if you move in and the next week your AC breaks, you can call the warranty company and they will replace that. I mean, we literally had that happen to us a few months ago when we moved into our new home and they replaced a $2,000 part. So it's, it can sometimes really save you money, but it's so typical on regular transactions that the seller pays for a residential service contract, that, I use Independence Title and they have, a seller net sheet calculator, which is really good. You should always use that because theirs is really good. But theirs assumes that the seller is paying this. Like, it's automatically written into the calculator. That's how common it is for sellers to cover this cost, typically 450 to 550 or 600. However, if you're an investor, it would be really strange for an investor to put a residential service contract, because you're either flipping or um, using it as a rental, and you don't want to have one of these with a rental. It would be a nightmare. Um, so investors, just that's going to be zero. Everybody else, we're going to put 450 to 600 in there. Okay, then the closing date. So this is one of the most important things, probably after price. Closing date is the most important negotiation. Before you choose a closing date, you're going to want to make sure that your lender can make that closing date. So you want to talk with them. Right now with COVID, a lot of lenders are behind and they're saying, you need to put 45 days. It used to be that typical would be about 30 days to close. Now we're trying to put more, 35 to 45 days, just because, like I said, underwriters are way behind with all of the volume of the refinances they're doing too. So if you're paying cash, though, you can generally close within a week. If you're paying cash, be careful that you understand where your cash is coming from and how long it takes to transfer. Because I have had clients that maybe they were using their 401k money to make a cash sale, and then they found out, oh, it actually takes 4 days for that transfer to happen. So don't put the closing before, factor in how long it takes to transfer the money over to whatever bank account. But otherwise, a cash sale should be really fast. The only thing that sometimes slows it down is waiting for a survey if that's needed. But otherwise, you can usually do 1 week to 10 days. And then the next thing is closing costs. So this paragraph is basically the buyer asking the seller to cover some of their closing costs. So as a buyer, you typically pay a large amount of closing costs because you have a lender fees that you have to pay. So origination fees, points, all of these things. So your closing costs can make it to where you have to bring a pretty big pile of cash to close. If you are an investor, you're probably going to put nothing here because you're an investor. You're either making a cash offer or you're putting a lot down, and it would be assumed that you have the cash. But if you're a regular home buyer, it's usually assumed that you're going to ask for some kind of closing cost coverage. In this hot market, I would say if you can do without them, like if you have the cash to pay all of your own closing costs, you should, and if you like the house, because it's definitely a big thing. It's a big deal to the seller because on the price, like if the appraisal comes in low and then you've asked for a lot of closing costs, that hits their bottom line a lot more. So if you ask for them if it's appropriate and if your agent thinks that you can get away with it, but if you can, the more flexible you can be on that, the more likely you are to get the home, which is basically all of these. If you notice, the more flexible you are, the more likely you are to be able to work out a deal with the seller. The problem comes in when you have limitations that are outside of your control. That's when it gets hard. Okay, and then the option period and fee. So, option period means the period of time after the contract is signed that you can just walk away for any reason. You don't have to give a reason. During that option period, you can walk away, get your earnest money back, and it's like nothing ever happened. So, you pay a fee for that because the seller is taking it off the market for you. So, you pay them a fee basically to do that. Now in San Antonio, the typical fee is $10 per day. But again, that's negotiable. I have had investor clients that put a really high option fee, and then that made them really attractive because, that seller, like one of my clients put $500 option fee. Well, then that seller knows, like, hey, even if they back out, I'm going to get 500 bucks. So that's a really nice little hack. If you are walking the property and you feel really confident in your ability to, do look at the repairs and things, and you feel pretty confident that there aren't any like hidden problems, then you could do that. But for a typical buyer, this is just going to be $10 a day, and then the option period is generally 7 to 10 days. The period is also something that you can shorten to make your offer more attractive. So you can put 3 days or 5 days. All I would caution you if you want to do that is I would say make sure you schedule the inspection before you submit the contract. I will typically, if a buyer wants to do that, I'll call Hines, my inspector, and just make sure he's going to be available, and he'll even like keep a spot in his schedule just in case the contract goes through and we need somebody, really quick within 3 days. So arrange all of that before you even are under contract if you're going to do one of these like really short option periods, just so that you make sure you do all of your due diligence. You don't want to scrimp on that just to get the contract. But it's a great way because, I mean, if you can get the inspection done within 3 days, why not? Like, then it's better for everyone, and then your offer looks so much better. Okay, and then there's a few other things. These are mostly on addendums. So the non-realty items is basically if you want the fridge, washer and dryer, sometimes playground equipment, anything that isn't the house itself, but that you want them to leave behind. There's a whole other addendum. It's called non-realty items. Make sure you fill that out because they have had some sneaky sellers list the property on the market and say washer and dryer included with the home. And then if you didn't fill this out, they were like, well, you didn't fill it out. So it's like, well, you said it came with the. Anyway, fill it out if in doubt. Um, HOA documents, these are, if you're in an HOA, which many San Antonio homes are, unfortunately, it costs money for the HOA to basically print and mail you all of their rules and guidelines and covenants. And it's usually a stack that thick of nonsense that for the HOA, but they charge you a fee to do that, and they charge you a fee to do a resale certificate. So those fees are usually like $100, maybe 200. It's not a lot of money, but somebody has to pay for it. So there's an addenda, and it says whether the buyer or seller is going to pay for it. It is, it's kind of one of those things. It's like more of a pain than it is a cost. Like, it's just annoying to deal with HOAs, and it sometimes can be hard to get them to send the paperwork over. So if you can cover that for the seller, sometimes that makes your offer more attractive because they don't have to do as much. But it's usually not about the money there because we're only talking a few $100. The financing contingency, there's going to be a third party financing addendum, and you're going to tell the seller whether you're using FHA or conventional, or a VA loan. And it has, some things in there, some language in there, like if it doesn't appraise for enough, then we can get out of this contract. But there is one pretty crucial spot where you put an amount of days. So it's your financing contingency, and you put the number of days you have to get yourself approved for the loan. So basically, if you are trucking along and you go through underwriting and underwriting rejects you, it says like, we're not going to give you this loan. If you're still in that period, you can get out of the contract. So you want to make that as long as possible. And, some sellers will allow you to do that and some won't. I usually try to get away with as much as I can, like 20, 25 days or so. And then lease backs, I think I mentioned earlier that I had called the seller and said, what do you need? And they needed to stay in the home. So you can do that up front and say, you can actually sign kind of a really simplified short lease that allows them to stay in the home for a couple weeks, a month. That's a really good way if you're an investor and it doesn't matter, like you can wait the month. That's a good way to give your offer a little bit of an edge that doesn't necessarily cost you money. Of course, there's liability and there's some drawbacks there, and it's super case specific. So, definitely evaluate it at the time, but it exists and you should be aware of it. Okay, so this 1 to 4 family contract, that's your offer. You sign it, you send it over. Um, that is not the only thing you send over, though. You also send over, if you are getting a loan, if you're getting the FHA or conventional or VA loan, you're going to send over a pre-qualification letter. Some lenders have started calling them pre-approval letters. It's all the same thing. It's basically a mortgage broker or a loan officer saying, yes, I pulled their credit, I looked at their, cash on hand, and they can actually buy this house. It's not binding at all. It really doesn't mean a whole lot other than you've gone to a mortgage broker. I would suggest, because sometimes I have people say, oh, well, I can go online and they just print one out, basically, like they'll approve anybody. And it's much, much, much better if you can go to a local lender who has a stronger pre-approval process, because if the listing agent knows what they're doing, they're going to understand that you're a more qualified buyer or you're a more safe buyer. When I'm the listing agent, I actually call all of the lenders off of the letter and just find out if there's going to be any issues with underwriting. So you want to make sure that you have a relationship there and they pick up the phone, because I found a lot of times people won't email back or pick up the phone. So you want to make sure that there's a relationship, and you want a good pre-approval letter. Like it matters. And then if you're paying cash, you don't need a pre-approval letter, obviously, but you do need some kind of statement to show that you have the cash on hand to pay it. So that can be a 401k statement, it could be a bank statement. I've sent like a screenshot of a bank account. It doesn't have to be real fancy, but you just want to reassure the seller that you are who you say you are, and you can do what you say you can do. And then the other thing that I would say, maybe 25% of buyers agents do this, and I wish more would, but I think a cover letter with your offer is really important, because it just goes further. It shows that you really care about the home. I've put one here from one of my wonderful, wonderful, wonderful clients that wrote this. And, it's got emotion. It shows them like how much you like the house. It's not always going to work, but it definitely can sway in your favor, especially if you're also calling and finding out what can I do to be helpful. It's all about just showing the listing agent that you're a good buyer and you're somebody who's going to stick around till the end of the sale. If the client doesn't do this, I usually do it for them. If it's an investor, it would be kind of weird for an investor to write their own letter, but I'll do a cover letter and just talk about like, hey, this is really solid investor. This is what they've been looking for this for a while. Just kind of say something that reassures the listing agent and the seller. It just helps a lot. So, you wouldn't just send a resume to somebody, you'd put a cover letter with it. Same thing. I mean, you're offering to buy a home. You should present that in a meaningful way and that looks professional. So just one more thing. Don't be a jerk. So I think that a lot of times people think negotiation in real estate is like, oh, I'm going to like make my offer and be hard, and that doesn't work. It's much better to just work together with people. And then I would say this is for on market homes, but this is for off market homes too. And I'm sure Nick can tell you all about how it's so much easier to work with a seller if you develop some rapport and you take the time to get to know them. People work with people they like, so you need to be likable, and you need to be, not a pushover, but just showing that you can look at things from their perspective. You want to look like a reasonable person. I mean, it's really, if you have multiple offers and they're mostly the same, you're going off of, okay, these buyers seem reasonable. These buyers didn't say anything. You just want to make sure that you can do everything you can to get your offer accepted.